Gray morning light seeped hesitantly through the narrow windows of Ironwood State Prison, casting long shadows across cold, concrete walls. Inside the sterile, unyielding cell, Marcus Mark Bennett lay shackled to a steel bed, the weight of impending death pressing down on him like a physical force. His face, worn and etched with deep lines of exhaustion, told a story of years stolen away, 5 years spent fighting a conviction he insisted was wrong. Outside, guards patrolled with mechanical precision, their footsteps echoing relentlessly, a grim soundtrack to Mark's final hours. Despite the sterile surroundings and harsh reality, a single thought clung stubbornly to his mind. He needed to see Max one last time. Max, his loyal German shepherd, the one living thread to a life before despair. Mark's voice, hoarse and fragile, carried that desperate plea to the prison staff, a request that seemed almost impossible in a place where rules were ironclad and mercy scarce. Yet somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope flickered. Perhaps, just perhaps, the warden might grant this small act of humanity. Memories flooded in, unbidden and vivid. Long morning walks through quiet Redwood City streets, Max's eager paws padding alongside him, the dog's bright eyes full of unwavering loyalty and unspoken understanding. Those moments were all he had left now, fragile shards of a life nearly lost. As dawn's pale light spread slowly across the sky, Mark felt the cold chains clink as he shifted his weight, the harsh metal biting into his skin. The execution chamber loomed just hours away, a silent promise of finality. Yet in this bleak silence, Mark clung to that one last hope, to see Max's familiar face, to feel a moment's comfort before the darkness closed in. In a world that had turned its back on him, that moment of connection was everything. Helen Carter's hands trembled as she parked her old pickup truck outside the modest townhouse, the morning sun casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. Inside, Max, the aging German shepherd, lay curled on his dog bed, his fur graying, but his spirit undiminished. Helen's heart clenched every time she looked at him. Max hadn't seen Mark since the trial 5 years ago, and the distance between them felt unbearable. The life they had dreamed of together, the engagement ring tucked away in a drawer, the half-packed apartment, the plans for a future, had all been shattered the night Mark was arrested, accused of a crime Helen never believed he committed. The evidence had been thin, contradictory, and suspiciously convenient for the prosecution, but no amount of pleading or appeals had reversed the verdict. Helen had spent countless sleepless nights chasing leads, contacting lawyers, journalists, anyone who might listen, but the system was a wall too high to scale. Now, the weight of that relentless struggle sat heavy on her chest as she crouched beside Max, running her fingers through his fur. "You miss him, don't you, boy?" she whispered, her voice cracking. The dog lifted his head, ears perked, sensing her pain. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, a call from Ironwood Prison. Helen's breath caught as the warden's calm, official voice explained that Mark's final wish to see Max had received conditional approval. The impossible was happening. They had 90 minutes to get Max to the prison, or the chance would be lost forever. Panic mixed with hope surged through Helen as she quickly gathered Max, threw a jacket over her shoulders, and threw Max's leash in her hand. This was the last thread connecting Mark to a life stolen from him, a fragile chance to remind him he wasn't forgotten. As she sped toward the prison gates, her pulse thundered in her ears, the roads empty, but the weight of what lay ahead crushing. Max's soft whines and shifting beside her were the only sounds breaking the tense silence, both of them drawn into the gravity of a moment that might never come again. Detective James Carter adjusted his tie in the cracked mirror of his dimly lit apartment, the weight of years pressing down on his tired shoulders. At 62, his salt and pepper hair was a testament to decades spent chasing truths that sometimes slipped just out of reach. The Mark Johnson case had haunted him for half a decade, a nagging doubt he dared not voice publicly, an open and shut murder conviction that never sat right. James remembered the day he interrogated Mark, a man whose calm innocence unsettled the hardened detective more than any confession ever had. Over the years, fragments of inconsistencies surfaced, missing evidence, witnesses whose statements shifted, and financial trails that vanished into shadows. His partner had confided in him, quietly suggesting that this case might have been manipulated, that the city wanted a scapegoat to close a high-profile crime, and Mark fit the bill perfectly. Now, on the morning of Mark's scheduled execution, James found himself poring over old transcripts, rewatching interrogation tapes in a small, forgotten corner of the police archives. His fingers trembled as he transferred files to a flash drive, desperation etched into every motion. Time was running out. Only hours remained to unearth anything that might save a man he once condemned but now suspected was innocent. His phone buzzed, a terse message lighting up the screen. Final appeal denied. Execution at 9 a.m. Do what you can. James swallowed the lump in his throat and reached for a burner phone. I need everything you can find on this case. Anything digital, anything hidden, he whispered into the receiver. He knew the stakes. One wrong move could end his career. But the alternative, letting an innocent man die, was unthinkable. As the city outside stirred to life under a gray sky, James steeled himself for the battle ahead, fueled by a quiet hope that the truth could still break through the darkness before it was too late. Mark Collins sat quietly in the sterile holding cell, the cold, fluorescent light above casting harsh shadows across the faded walls. His body was shackled to the steel bench, each clink of the chains echoing the heavy weight in his chest. The familiar scent of disinfectant, mixed with a faint trace of despair, lingered in the air. Outside, footsteps marched with unyielding precision, reminders of the ticking clock counting down to his scheduled execution. But today, something different stirred within the walls of Iron Ridge Penitentiary. The warden, Diane Marshall, appeared at the door, her expression a careful balance between authority and compassion. In her hands, she held a fragile thread of hope, a conditional approval that Mark might be granted one final request to see his dog, Rex. Rex was no ordinary dog. A towering German shepherd with eyes full of loyalty, he had been Mark's steadfast companion through years of hardship, a living symbol of the life Mark once dreamed of. Diane's words cut through the suffocating stillness. Mr. Collins, your request to see Rex has been approved, but the time is short. Mark's breath caught in his throat, a fragile smile breaking through his worn features. Moments later, Helen Parker arrived, clutching Rex's leash tightly, her eyes glistening with a mix of fear and hope. The dog's ears perked up as he caught sight of Mark, his tail wagging with restrained excitement. When Rex bounded forward, his nails tapping against the tiled floor, Mark felt a rush of emotion he hadn't known in years. Warmth, love, a fleeting glimpse of freedom. Helen's presence brought a bittersweet edge. She represented the life they once planned together before everything spiraled into darkness. The apartment they shared, the wedding invitations, the dreams, all now fragments scattered by fate's cruel hand. As Mark knelt to embrace Rex, tears traced silent paths down his cheeks. For a few precious minutes, the cold reality of death receded, replaced by the unspoken bond of a man and his dog, a lifeline tethered to hope amidst the approaching storm. But beyond the cell door, unseen forces were racing against time to rewrite a story long thought sealed by fate. Helen's hands trembled as she gripped Rex's leash, heart pounding against the mounting pressure of the day. Every mile closer to Iron Ridge Penitentiary felt like a lifetime compressed into moments, the weight of the impossible task ahead settling heavily on her shoulders. Rex, sensing her tension, stayed close, his warm presence a fragile anchor in the storm of uncertainty. The memories flooded her mind. Mark's infectious laughter on quiet mornings, the shared dreams of a future that now seemed so distant. But beneath the nostalgia was a raw ache, a gnawing fear that she might arrive too late. As she pulled into the prison's towering gates, the world narrowed to the sterile walls behind barbed wire and the urgent hope of a final reunion. The guards eyed her cautiously but allowed passage once the paperwork confirmed Mark's request. Each step through the cold corridors was punctuated by the echo of her own heartbeat. And when the heavy door finally slid open, the sight before her stole the breath from her lungs. Mark, gaunt and worn, knelt on the cold floor, his eyes lighting up with a fragile spark of life, as Rex eagerly bounded to his side. The reunion was raw and unfiltered, the desperate lick of a loyal dog, the trembling embrace of a man clinging to a last thread of hope. For 15 fleeting minutes, time stood still as past and present collided in that stark cell, walls witnessing a bond that transcended years of isolation and injustice. Outside the door, the weight of looming death threatened to crush them. But inside, a flicker of humanity refused to be extinguished. As Helen watched Mark whisper to Rex, tears blurred her vision. This moment was both a balm and a torment, a reminder of all they'd lost and all they still yearned for. When the warden's voice cut through the silence, signaling the end of this fragile reprieve, the harsh reality crashed back. But for Mark, in that fleeting touch of warmth and loyalty, there was a renewed strength, a silent promise to hold on, to fight, and to believe in the impossible until the very end. Detective James Carter paced the cramped office, the weight of doubt pressing heavily on his shoulders. For years, he had been the city's unwavering enforcer of justice, the man who prided himself on closing cases and putting criminals behind bars. But this one, the conviction of Mark Stevens, had haunted him like a shadow he couldn't shake. The more he revisited the evidence, the more cracks he found in the foundation of the case. Fingerprints that didn't quite fit, witnesses whose stories shifted like sand, and a suspicious absence of any real motive. His gut told him something was wrong, but bureaucracy and politics had kept him silent for too long. Now, with the execution looming mere hours away, Carter was racing against the clock. He needed one last piece of proof, something undeniable to halt the irreversible. Pulling out his phone, he sent a desperate message to an old contact skilled in digital forensics, hoping that hidden traces might still be uncovered in the tangled web of bank records and communication logs tied to the victim. Every passing second was a reminder that time was merciless. Memories of the initial investigation played like a broken record in his mind. How Mark had pleaded innocence, how Carter had dismissed it as the lies of a desperate man. But that image no longer sat comfortably in his conscience. The detective's office was cluttered with files, but none carried the weight of guilt or certainty he once believed. Instead, they whispered of a conspiracy far beyond Mark's reach, a powerful figure lurking in the shadows, orchestrating events with cold precision. As dawn approached, Carter's hands trembled, not from fatigue, but from the crushing realization that his career, his reputation, and a man's life now hinged on evidence he could barely grasp. Determined, he grabbed a stack of documents and prepared to face the warden, knowing full well that the system might resist change. But justice demanded a chance, even if it was the very last one. Warden Margaret Collins stood by the heavy steel door of the final holding cell, her expression a careful balance of authority and unease. The gravity of the moment weighed heavily on her, and execution was a solemn duty. But now, with new evidence casting shadows over Mark Stevens' conviction, she found herself caught between protocol and conscience. Inside the sterile room, Mark sat quietly on the narrow bunk, his eyes fixed on the floor, a man stripped of freedom, yet clutching to fragile hope. The faint scent of disinfectant mingled with the cold fluorescent light, casting long shadows that seemed to echo the uncertainty gripping everyone involved. When the door finally opened, Warden Collins stepped in, flanked by Detective Carter and Mark's longtime fiancée, Emily. Mark's gaze flickered up, meeting Emily's eyes, where tears threatened to spill, reflecting years of pain and a flicker of renewed faith. Collins cleared her throat softly, breaking the heavy silence. Due to compelling new information, the execution has been stayed for 48 hours pending further investigation, she announced, her voice steady yet tinged with empathy. Relief surged through the room, but it was tempered by the lingering tension of the unknown. Emily rushed forward, embracing Mark with a desperation born of years spent waiting on the edge of despair. Carter's steady presence reassured them both, a silent promise that he would fight to uncover the truth. Outside, the corridors buzzed with whispers, the prison staff exchanging glances, aware that the course of justice was shifting beneath their feet. The room, once an unyielding chamber of finality, transformed into a fragile sanctuary of second chances. Mark exhaled deeply, the weight of impending death lifting slightly, replaced by a complex mix of gratitude, fear, and cautious hope. Warden Collins stepped back, giving the man a moment of quiet dignity in a world that had nearly torn it away. This unexpected reprieve was more than just a delay. It was a beacon, a chance for truth to pierce through years of shadows and for a life to be reclaimed from the brink of oblivion. Warden Margaret Collins stood by the heavy steel door of the final holding cell, her expression a careful balance of authority and unease. The gravity of the moment weighed heavily on her. An execution was a solemn duty, but now, with new evidence casting shadows over Mark Stevens' conviction, she found herself caught between protocol and conscience. Inside the sterile room, Mark sat quietly on the narrow bunk, his eyes fixed on the floor, a man stripped of freedom, yet clutching to fragile hope. The faint scent of disinfectant mingled with the cold fluorescent light, casting long shadows that seemed to echo the uncertainty gripping everyone involved. When the door finally opened, Warden Collins stepped in, flanked by Detective Carter and Mark's longtime fiancée, Emily. Mark's gaze flickered up, meeting Emily's eyes, where tears threatened to spill, reflecting years of pain and a flicker of renewed faith. Collins cleared her throat softly, breaking the heavy silence. Due to compelling new information, the execution has been stayed for 48 hours pending further investigation, she announced, her voice steady yet tinged with empathy. Relief surged through the room, but it was tempered by the lingering tension of the unknown. Emily rushed forward, embracing Mark with a desperation born of years spent waiting on the edge of despair. Carter's steady presence reassured them both, a silent promise that he would fight to uncover the truth. Outside, the corridors buzzed with whispers, the prison staff exchanging glances, aware that the course of justice was shifting beneath their feet. The room, once an unyielding chamber of finality, transformed into a fragile sanctuary of second chances. Mark exhaled deeply, the weight of impending death lifting slightly, replaced by a complex mix of gratitude, fear, and cautious hope. Warden Collins stepped back, giving the man a moment of quiet dignity in a world that had nearly torn it away. This unexpected reprieve was more than just a delay. It was a beacon, a chance for truth to pierce through years of shadows, and for a life to be reclaimed from the brink of oblivion. Detective Carter paced restlessly outside the warden's office, the weight of the unfolding drama pressing heavily on his shoulders. Every moment counted now as the clock ticked relentlessly toward a possible final decision. Inside, Warden Collins was deep in conversation with the governor's legal counsel, relaying the newly uncovered evidence that could unravel a conviction built on shaky ground. Carter's phone buzzed incessantly, a stream of messages from his contact confirming financial transactions and location data implicating another suspect. This was the breakthrough they had desperately needed. Yet the uncertainty gnawed at him. Would it be enough to halt an irreversible sentence? Meanwhile, Emily sat quietly in a corner, her fingers nervously twisting a worn locket, a symbol of hope and a reminder of all that was at stake. Her eyes never left the door, yearning for a glimpse of Mark, who was somewhere just beyond, clinging to his own fragile hope. Outside, the sterile halls of Ironwood Prison buzzed with muted tension, whispers threading through the corridors like ghosts of doubt. The old clock above the warden's office seemed to count down not just minutes, but the fragile chance at justice. When Warden Collins finally emerged, her face bore the exhaustion of a battle fought quietly behind closed doors. "We have a temporary stay," she announced, voice steady but heavy. 48 hours to investigate further. The execution is off the table for now. Relief rippled through those waiting, a collective exhale after years of suffocating despair. Yet beneath that relief lay the knowledge that this was only the beginning, a race against time to unearth truth from buried lies and manipulations. Detective Carter's gaze hardened with resolve. He knew the real fight was just starting. Justice, long denied, had a chance to be reclaimed, but only if the truth could shine brighter than the shadows of doubt. For Emily, for Mark, for all who had believed in innocence despite the odds, this was more than a reprieve. It was the fragile flicker of hope they would hold on to fiercely, even in the darkest hours ahead. The days that followed Mark's release unfolded like a whirlwind of emotions and revelations, each moment charged with the weight of what had been lost and the fragile hope of what could be regained. Emily stood steadfast by his side, her presence a quiet anchor as they navigated the chaotic aftermath, media frenzy, legal battles, and the slow process of rebuilding a shattered life. The city buzzed with news of the scandal, the crooked officials exposed, the conspiracies unraveled, and the truth finally clawing its way into the light. Mark grappled with the shadows of his past, haunted by sleepless nights filled with nightmares, haunted by the memories of prison walls that had confined more than his body. Yet, amidst the turmoil, there was a newfound strength, rooted in the loyal gaze of Shadow, who never left his side, and in the unwavering love of Emily, who never stopped fighting. Together, they ventured back to Redwood Creek, to the very park where dreams had once blossomed, where Mark used to walk with Shadow under the warm sun, imagining a future now nearly within reach. The air was crisp, carrying whispers of renewal as Mark breathed deeply, feeling the grass beneath his feet, the open sky above, and the endless possibility ahead. Their laughter mingled with the rustle of leaves as Shadow bounded freely, a living symbol of resilience and hope. Detective Delaney's tireless pursuit of justice continued, uncovering more truths, exposing more shadows that had long cloaked the city's darkest corners. The men who had orchestrated the frame-up faced justice, their fall a testament to the power of perseverance and truth. Mark's journey was far from over. There were wounds to heal, bridges to rebuild, and a life to reclaim, piece by piece. But as he stood by Emily's side, watching Shadow chase sunlight and shadows alike, he understood that freedom was more than a word. It was a hard-fought gift, a promise to live fully, fiercely, and with a heart unbound. The past no longer defined him, it had forged him. And with every step forward, Mark Mason chose hope.